Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be my team selection for Game Week 20, where I only have one free transfer available yet again, and I'm looking to bolster every single position, maybe even my goalkeeper, although that's certainly debatable. I'll be reviewing Game Week 19 and then discussing my transfer plans for the upcoming deadline. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to over 200 likes on YouTube and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 31,000 subscribers. Check all the links in the description below for my Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. You can also find me on Blue Sky by tapping FPL Dylan, and the same goes for most social media platforms. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Arsenal haven't kept the clean sheet away from home in the Premier League in 8 consecutive games, but they have been keeping them at the Emirates Stadium on a regular basis. But that's a 2-pointer by Raya, who almost made an absolute howler, by the way, but he made a save off the line, and that's pretty much it. Mbeumo scored in the opening portion of that game, but Raya had nothing to do other than that save he made shortly afterwards, and then Arsenal equalised a few moments later and were able to take control of that game, particularly in the second half. I still think Raya is in the podium of the best goalkeepers in FPL, but there's no denying that Sells and Pickford offer much better value. My defence was much worse this week, Robinson getting an assist in a 2-2 draw against Bournemouth, and he was my best defender out of anybody I had in my starting 11 and also on my bench, because my other options failed to keep a clean sheet and got no attacking returns. Gabriel got 2 points against Brentford, and it was quite disappointing by him, but he's been very consistent and you can kind of forgive him for that blank. If he can stay fit until the rest of the season, I think he'll be the highest scoring defender in the game, but he faces stiff competition from the likes of Aina and the informed Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Liverpool are looking imperious at this moment in time. But I think Gabriel is still the best perimeter defender, especially in terms of value. He's going to score a few more goals. He's always a threat from set pieces, and Arsenal have the best set piece routine in the Premier League. But my other defender, I'm less sure of right now, and that's Levi Colwill, who was so close to 12 points the previous week against Fulham, and that turned into 4 after Fulham's late comeback. And in this game against Ipswich Town, there was no hope at all of any points from Colwill after Delap scored that penalty, and he ended up getting booked as well. So Colwill with 0 points in the end, a very disappointing showing from him. My other options were Van den Berg, who got 1 point, and also Veltman, who didn't feature at all against Aston Villa, but at least it gave me 8 points back in Game Week 18, but he has been a disastrous signing, and I've kind of skipped a lot of the good options in this defence, like Trent Alexander-Arnold, Lewis Hall, who I had in Game Week 1, but he didn't really do much for me during that time frame, and then Nottingham Forest defenders like Aina or Milenkovic. I still like Robinson and Gabriel, and I could see myself holding them on a potential wildcard, but the rest of them are sellable. My midfield was extremely disappointing this week. Mohamed Salah goes without saying. I don't really count his returns as anything special because everyone's captaining him at the moment, or at least his effective ownership would suggest that a large proportion of FPL managers are doing so, and I'm not gaining too much from his returns. Of course, if I captain him and some people go against him with the likes of Palmer, I'll have a few small gains, but nothing to write home about. He got 16 points against West Ham in a 5-0 victory. Liverpool are going from strength to strength, and everything goes through Salah in that attack. He is an essential pick at this moment in time. That could change in a couple of months or maybe several weeks, but it's hard to see that at the moment, and let's see if Salah can keep this form up, because it's the best start we've ever seen to a Premier League season, and a fantastic first half of the campaign by Liverpool, who have that game in hand over the likes of Arsenal and Nottingham Forest. My second midfielder was a certain Ismaila Sarr. I'm a bit gutted about signing him, to be fair, and I was never convinced about it. It was between him and Anthony Gordon, and long term I think the Newcastle winger would have been a better purchase. And then you've got the likes of Luis Diaz and Jota scoring against West Ham, and Diaz getting 9 points overall. But I'm not a big fan of most midfielders in this position, to be quite honest with you. And if anything, besides Salah and Palmer, I'd argue Mbeumo is the third best midfielder in the game still, with Anthony Gordon a close fourth, and then Diaz probably makes up the top 5. But Mbeumo scored against Arsenal and got 7 points. He was on course for bonus points throughout the entire game, but that was removed towards the very end of that match, which is slightly disappointing from an FPL perspective, but he is fixture proof, and he's got some decent games coming up from an attacking perspective, like Southampton away and Man City at home. The only fixture I don't like him too much for is Liverpool, but he could score in that, considering it's going to be a home game and Brentford score so many goals at the GTEC Community Stadium. But my final midfielder was probably a huge shock and disappointment in Cole Palmer. He hit the woodwork twice against Ipswich Town and Chelsea failed to score on another occasion, just like against Everton only a couple of weeks ago, and that's 3 consecutive matches where Chelsea have dropped points, but they're still in a strong league position, and they have exceeded expectations, and Cole Palmer remains the second best midfielder. It was a much stronger showing from my forwards, and Joao Pedro got a brace of assists against Aston Villa. He has a decent record actually against that opposition, and I talked about holding him in the Gameweek 19 Transits video, but he is still on the chopping block for me to make an upgrade in this forward area, although you could certainly argue that a certain Nicholas Jackson has been underperforming and maybe he's the one to sell, and that facilitates the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold at the back, or maybe Anthony Gordon or Luis Diaz in the midfield. But I'm very happy with Joao Pedro in Gameweek 19 after a set of very disappointing outcomes and output from him, because he definitely has that high ceiling in him, but he can be very inconsistent and injury prone, so he's not the most reliable of FPL picks. Then again, he is very cheap. Unlike Isak, who is just going from strength to strength, he is scoring in every single game it seems, and I think he's the best forward in FPL by some distance. Erling Haaland over the next 3 fixtures could actually rival him or maybe exceed him, but that's going to be a very small sample size, and in terms of value, I think Isak could be a season-long hold if he stays fit, which is a very big if, looking at his recent injury record during his time at Newcastle, and the likes of Nicholas Jackson have really faltered in recent weeks. So I think Isak is clear at the top. Then you're looking at Gabriel Jesus, maybe Cunha when he's back from suspension in Gameweek 21, and a certain Chris Wood, who has been so consistent throughout the entire campaign. But my final forward was the only disappointment in this position. Nicholas Jackson blanked against Ipswich Town, and he only got 1 point off the bench, but thankfully he didn't get booked, so there's no suspension risk for the foreseeable future unless he gets sent off, and at least Joao Pedro and Isak got some good returns. In the end, I got 68 points in Gameweek 19, which is very disappointing. That's 2 red arrows in a row, and buying Bruno Fernandes was very costly for me at the time, and if I had bought any other midfielder, it would have been a green arrow back in Gameweek 18, but this time round there are several things I lacked, like no Trent Alexander-Arnold at the back, not having an Anthony Gordon or Diaz in the midfield, and underperforming players like Nicholas Jackson up front, but I got the captaincy spot on at least, and you could even argue that my defensive line was just not good enough. Only Robertson got a return, and it was a measly 4 points. So there were some issues here, and in the long term, you look at Veltman and Vandenberg, they're simply not good enough. Even Semenyo, I'm not particularly happy with. He has some tough fixtures coming up, although he is facing teams he did well against in the first half of the season, but he always gets points on my bench, and when I start him, he's absolutely useless, and he did get that contentious assist against Fulham as well, but I think in the end it was warranted. It's just a shame I bought Ismail Assar and I wasted another transfer. That's been a common theme throughout the Christmas period, and I think rolling in some cases would have been much better for my squad, and I wouldn't have lost out on 50 plus points in certain cases, but it's all behind us. We can learn from our mistakes, and that is the plan going into Gameweek 20, where I have so many different issues. I am tempted to even use the wild card, but I try to stave off that temptation for now and focus on building a really competitive team with free transfers. If I was wildcarding this week, David Raya wouldn't make it into that team, but he's right up there amongst the best goalkeepers in FPL. He's still on my podium of the best shot stoppers, but Sells and Pickford are better FPL picks between the sticks, and I think they offer better value overall with the saves and bonus points potential. But Raya is still a decent choice against Brighton away, but then you've got Aston Villa and Tottenham at home in the upcoming weeks, and I'm not too confident. Arsenal are still looking quite strong defensively, but away from home, I don't get that same impression I did last season, where they went to any ground and kept so many clean sheets and got some massive victories there on their travels. If they can replicate their home form and at least do half of that away from home, I think David Raya will be the best goalkeeper in the game. I've made so many defender transfers in recent weeks, but I still think there is room for improvement here. But Robinson is right up there amongst the very best defenders in the game. That's 7 assists for the season, more than any other defender so far in this campaign. And it's Ipswich Town at home next. Despite their impressive win against Chelsea, I still think Fulham have enough here to win this game comfortably and keep a clean sheet. But Robinson has so many avenues to points through assists, the clean sheets and the bonus points. We haven't seen too much goal threat from him though. That's the only kind of downside to him, but I think he already offers great value, and there is a reason why he has gone up in price to 5 million, and he's still worth that price tag, and arguably worth 0.8 million more than Timothy Castagna and Joachim Andersen. My second option is Gabriel and an Arsenal defensive double up against Brighton away. They obviously dropped points against Brighton earlier this season when Arsenal went down to 10 men, but I think before that red card, they were on course for a comfortable victory and maybe another clean sheet at the Emirates, but I'm not confident of that happening at the Amex Stadium, and Arsenal need to get their act together defensively in away matches. It's been a really big problem this season, and if they can't replicate the away form from last season, or at least get to a similar level, it's going to be very difficult for them to push Liverpool all the way in this Premier League title race. And my final option is Levi Colwill against Crystal Palace away. Chelsea have a great record against the Eagles, but I'm not that confident in that Chelsea defence, but they still have one of the best records away from home, only Liverpool better them now in that table, but Chelsea have really fallen off a cliff in recent weeks and they can get back on track, but Colwill won't get many goals or assists. I'd be surprised if he got one this week. And then you look at clean sheet probabilities, it's not looking too good either, but my other options are Vandenberg against Southampton away. That's something to think about. And then again, Brentford have the second worst away record in the Premier League this season, and the other option is Veltman at home to Arsenal. On paper, my midfield isn't too shabby, and Mohamed Salah is the best option in the game. I've owned him since Game Week 10 now, and I did have that period around Game Week 5 or 6 where I did have Mohamed Salah, and he wasn't that impressive for me, but of course selling him on the Game Week 6 wildcard was one of my worst mistakes of the entire campaign. He faces Man United at home next, and that is a great fixture right now. It's a rivalry. Maybe if United turn up, they can cause some problems, but we're talking about a very slim chance here. Liverpool could go big, win by 3, 4, or possibly 5, and it could be easier than the West Ham game, which is saying something because the Hammers were woeful defensively, and it's going to be very difficult to go against Salah this week, and I've been saying that for some time now. You need a great reason to go against Salah for the captaincy, and I don't really see that this week. With the form Salah is in, United are an absolute shambles, and of course football can be a funny game and it can produce some surprises along the way, but you're going to need a miracle here to see Salah blank or for Liverpool to drop points. My second option in this position though would be Semenyo. Can he finally get a return whilst in my starting 11? The only other time that's happened was back in Game Week 6 when I first put Semenyo in on my wildcard and he scored against Southampton, but then the goal against Man City and 10 points, he was on my bench. Man United, same thing, and maybe that was a mistake of mine. And then that 5-pointer against Fulham last week, which would have been nice because it wasn't a great week for me overall. Semenyo is still a decent budget midfielder, don't get me wrong, and Bournemouth are one of the best teams in the Premier League up until now, but I'm not a big fan of the attacking assets, and I said this about Kluivert when he scored the hat-trick of penalties against Wolves. I think he's over-reliant on those set pieces. I would rather go for Howson or Kirkes in the backline, but investing in them now might be a bit awkward with their upcoming fixtures. My third option in this position would be Mbeumo against Southampton away. I would definitely not look to sell him this week, and despite Brentford being so poor away from home, and Mbeumo only has 2 returns in away matches this season, he can get bonus points if he does get that goal, and I do think Mbeumo is the third best midfielder in FPL, although if you're investing in new, Anthony Gordon might be a bigger priority based on Newcastle's form and their upcoming fixtures. And my final midfielder is Cole Palmer. I'm still very confident about him, just not enough to captain him over Mohamed Salah. That goes without saying, but he's always going to be in contention for the vice-captaincy, and if Salah ever gets a problem or I want to go a bit different, Palmer would be the one next in line. He's got the consistency, the high ceiling, and some great fixtures still, but Chelsea need to improve big time, otherwise they could be in trouble for the top 4. Something I always recommend to people is not make early transfers, but I did that by selling Joao Pedro to Chris Wood a couple of days ago, and in hindsight, it might have been better to sell Nicholas Jackson instead, as that would have given me enough money to upgrade Veltman to Trent Alexander-Arnold or buy Anthony Gordon or Luis Diaz for Semenyo or Ismail Assar. Now, long term, I'd rather have Sarr than Semenyo, but it's also a question of budget as I don't have that much money left in the bank. But Chris Wood is facing a Wolves side without their talisman Mateus Cunha, and Chris Wood was my best pick since Game Week 1, and that's one of my best decisions of the season. He is a talismanic figure himself, and he gets so many bonus points for Nottingham Forest, and I think my priority is to double or triple up on Liverpool and also add more Nottingham Forest assets into my squad, with Chris Wood and Aina being the standouts, and I certainly don't mind Milenkovic, as I highlighted in my recent Transfits video. My second forward, though, is going to be the informed Isak. He is probably the most informed striker across Europe right now, and he scored against Tottenham in the reverse fixture where I owned him back in Game Week 3, and he got some bonus points as well. And in recent weeks, he has been unplayable. He is returning in every single game, it seems, and Newcastle are the most informed team when you look at their recent results. They can make it 5 wins on the spin, but they do face a Tottenham side that can score a lot of goals, and Newcastle's record at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium isn't that great. So there is a bit of hope there for Spurs fans. But when you look at the form of both teams, it's hard to look past Isak, Anthony Gordon, and even Lewis Hall, who's been phenomenal in recent weeks. And I think that Newcastle triple up could work really well. I went for it back in Gameweek 1, but probably way too early because Newcastle started very slowly and it took them some time to get going. But my final forward is Nicholas Jackson. Maybe I should have kept Joao Pedro and kept him as an 8th attacker, for example. And then the funds for selling Nicholas Jackson would have been very crucial to buying Trent or Anthony Gordon. That's perhaps a mistake that I've made this week, but I still like Jackson in the long term if he can get those consistent minutes and he doesn't get benched every so often, which we have seen in the last 6 game weeks with Nkuku coming in against Southampton and Ipswich Town. But I think Jackson is still one of the best forwards in the game, but the appeal has certainly waned in recent weeks with Chelsea's form dipping and Jackson being in and out of that Chelsea team. But it's a solid 11 on paper for Gameweek 20 at least. There are still some issues going into the future, and if I had multiple transfers, I'd be very tempted to use all of them and bolster every single position. As usual, I have no backup goalkeeper who is set to feature, as Flecken made his return against Arsenal and only missed 50 minutes of the Brighton game when Valdemarsson was subbed on. Ismail Assar, Vandenberg and Veltman complete my bench, and in terms of benching headaches, I think Semenyo over Sarr would be the only one really, and you could argue Vandenberg over Colwill, but the rest speaks for itself, and then it's about the captaincy, which also is quite a no-brainer considering the form of Mohamed Salah and Liverpool. He is my captain yet again, and Cole Palmer is my vice. Until I see a drastic change in Salah's form or some hints that there's going to be a downturn, the same goes for Liverpool, I'm very happy to captain him. The fixture's also great. I would argue Man United at home is better than Crystal Palace away right now. In terms of other captaincy options, maybe Mbeumo or Isak, but I don't think Brentford's away form can be trusted, so I think having Mbeumo is already enough. None of my defenders really enter the equation. Chris Wood against Wolves away is a shout. A goal on bonus points is certainly on the cards. Jackson's form isn't good enough for me to really consider him, so Salah, Palmer, Isak are my top 3 candidates, and Salah is top by some distance, as he tends to be this season. I'm also tempted by taking a -4 hit and buying Gordon, but that would be for Sarr, who I just bought in, and he was quite unfortunate not to get a return with some great underlying stats against Southampton, and the fixtures are still quite promising in the upcoming week, so I think Sarr can be a decent budget midfielder, but in hindsight, Anthony Gordon would have been a better purchase, and I think having that or Trent Alexander-Arnold would have left me in a much better position from Gameweek 19 until the end of the campaign. But let's see what changes in the upcoming weeks. There's still a lot to play for in January, and let's now head over to other websites like Drafthound and fpl.team. Check out the link to Drafthound in the description below. I'd highly encourage you to have a look. A lot of you have signed up using my link and talked about how intuitive the website is. Their top suggestion for my transfer is one of Veltman, Colwill or Vandenberg making way for Lewis Hall, and that's a tremendous upgrade. And I also think Gabriel to Trent should be considered. It has crossed my mind, but ideally both of them would be in my setup. My favourite tool is the player rankings, and I can show you how quick it is to use. Buying Chris Wood for Joao Pedro is done at the click of a few buttons, and you can find any player there and filter it by expected points over a game week, over 3 game weeks, chance of scoring or assisting, you name it. And I also click this button here and it sorts out your benching dilemmas and the captaincy. The only real change compared to my team selection is Ismail Assar in for Nicholas Jackson in the starting 11, and the vice captaincy goes to Isak instead of Palmer, but the armband goes to Mohamed Salah. I'm in agreement with Drafthound there, and I have to say it's one of the best tools you can use in FPL. The same can be said about fpl.team, where you can visualize future game weeks. It's a great resource in the FPL community, and I am looking at buying Trent and Cunha for Veltman and Jackson. I would have nothing left over in the bank, so any price changes could put these plans to a halt, but this would be my ideal scenario, and maybe I'll make early transfers once the Gameweek 20 deadline has passed and after the Saturday games have come to a close. Check out my deadline stream on the Saturday, and there could also be a reaction stream either on that same day. If not, it will be on the Sunday. I'll keep you posted about that. But I could go for Raya in goal against Tottenham at home, with Gabriel forming that defensive double up for the Gunners, Robinson and Trent Alexander-Arnold. The midfield 5 includes Semenyo, Palmer, Salah, Mbeumo and Sarr. I think Semenyo away to Chelsea doesn't look great, but I think he could score at Stamford Bridge or get some sort of return. He can be quite surprising with the output, and he can leave a lot of FPL managers very frustrated. and the front two would be Cunha and Isak in this case, with Chris Wood on the bench when he faces Liverpool at home, and I definitely favour Liverpool in that matchup. Valdemarsson, Cole and Van den Berg would complete that 15-man squad, and I think it would speak for itself. The only downside to this would be the -4 hit being taken. I've taken several of those throughout December, and most of them have actually resulted in a lot of points being lost out on. And also Semenyo against Chelsea away isn't going to be the best on paper, to be quite honest with you, but I'm very happy with the rest, especially in the attacking areas. And Cunha, despite having some tough fixtures, will be back from suspension in Gameweek 21, and in the long term, I see him as the second or third best forward in FPL. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. I'm to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 31,000 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. And there's currently a 20% discount on Patreon for the next week, so be sure to check it out. There's also my Discord server, the FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on Spotify if you enjoy my content, and you can check out my other social media platforms like Blue Sky by typing FPL Dylan. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 20 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.